Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believing a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From the City of Angels in Los Angeles, welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I am Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver, at caregiverdave.com, along with my lovely co-host, Carletta Cole, who is not here today because she actually went on a vacation without me. Can you believe that? But she'll be back. We're also coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio and podcast networks on 26 global audio video platforms, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Vimeo, Stitcher Radio, Blog Talk Radio, and a whole bunch more. In fact, we are proud to be voted #1 caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM and #2 caregiver podcast on the bigger platform, FeedSpot, out of the top 60, and #2 on caringvillage.com. And we have an especially exciting show planned for you today. Mary Moreland is the author of the book, The Gap Between Loving and Supporting Someone with Alzheimer's, which conveys a moving and deeply personal portrait of her family's journey through the disease. Mary is also a lawyer and has spent the bulk of her 25-year legal career working on transactions outside the United States, principally in Latin America. And she also has vast experience in ethics and compliance matters, having served as the chief compliance officer for 2 publicly traded international companies. But before we get started, I do want to thank my last week's guest, Dr. Noah St. John, known as the father of affirmations and the mental health coach to the stars. Just a reminder, you can watch or listen to that interview and all our interviews, including this one, on our membership website, caregiverdave.com, and all of our other 26 global networks that I mentioned earlier. All right, enough of that. Mary, so great to have you on the Caregiver Dave show.
Thank you, Dave. I'm so happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, the honor is ours. And I always like to ask my guests, just who is Mary Moreland and why was she placed on this earth?
Well, I don't know. I think I'm still figuring that out. And maybe the reason I was placed here changes as I age. Okay, well, I think, I don't know, I live in Houston, Texas. I'm a mother of 2 teenage sons. I'm also a lawyer professional. And maybe the reason I was placed on this earth could be to write this book, which chronicles the experience with me and my mother through her almost decade journey living with Alzheimer's.
Well, that's a good answer. Congratulations. So tell me about your book. The title again is what?
It is The Gap Between Loving and Supporting Someone with Alzheimer's. And
that includes dementia also, right? Because Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Alzheimer's, my mother had dementia. My mother-in-law had dementia. And her sister, they have both left us. And her sister, who's 84 now, has dementia. And she found a boyfriend at her independent living facility who's 87. And they're just getting along just fine. And I'm so glad she did because, God, it would cost a fortune to replace what he does for her as a caregiver. And so God just answered a prayer, and now everyone's happy. And she's on her meds because I got involved because she was, she wasn't taking her meds. And she was just a wreck because, she couldn't remember things but now she's so much better. And I don't think she's getting worse. So that's a miracle.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that because I took over the care of my mother after my father's death. And during that time, it was such an upheaval and such an emotional time. And she was extra loopy. And when I did an inventory of all of her medications and compared them against what the doctor sent me, I found that she was off of her meds.
Yeah.
And she was taking the wrong medication. She was taking the wrong amount.
Right.
And so I would suggest that to any caregiver actually, once you assume your role, just to call the doctor and ask that person for a list of what your loved one should be on, and compare it with what they are on.
Right, because she was not taking her thyroid correctly. She wasn't taking her diabetes medication correctly. There was blood pressure medication. So when all that gets out of whack, it really mimics heavy duty dementia. I mean, she couldn't remember how to write a check, for the rent, and that's why, there was red flags about, hey, if your aunt is like this, she can't stay here because you have to be able to do certain things, and have certain abilities. And fortunately, we moved her in with her boyfriend, and he is acting as a caregiver. And I mean, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed either, but he's a lot better than her. And so with us taking care of her meds and her new insurance, we got her out of Kaiser. And that was a big relief, because Kaiser was just too far away. They're not everywhere. They're just far enough away to be inconvenient. So everything's great. And she loves to sing. So I started karaoke at the center, and it helps her remember the songs. And that's just really, really good. So your book, what do you hope readers will get out of your book?
Well, I really wrote my book with the purpose of helping people, because after the experience with my mother, like any experience, you reflect upon it and you realize there's certain things you didn't know, or you wish you had known, or you wish you had known sooner. So I really took some time to identify some topics that I thought would have been very helpful for my younger self. So it really is the book that I wish I could go back in time and hand, Mary this book and say, this is going to be really helpful for you.
That's great. I love going back to my younger self and having a discussion with me. I just wish I could remember those discussions. And if a stranger ever comes up to you and says, I'm from your future, listen to me, you should listen to them.
Next time that happens, I will.
Yes. So let's see. What can you do if you are at your wit's end, which is every day for a caregiver, several times a day, and don't think that you can stand another minute? Gee, have you ever felt that way?
I have felt that way. And, people, at least from what I found, because what I know is my personal experience, would tell me, go take a break. Go get a manicure, pedicure, go find a place to have a massage, go for a walk, and, make sure you take care of yourself. And I would just think, gosh, that's one other thing that I'm going to need to do. Like when and how am I going to take care of myself? Plus, a lot of those activities can be isolating. It's nice to go for a walk, but if you're just going for a walk by yourself, you may still be ruminating about everything you have to do, or you may start feeling guilty that you're actually going for a walk.
Yeah.
Now, every person is different. Different things work for different people. For me, talking to people was very helpful. And I wouldn't underestimate the Alzheimer's Association helpline. It's a 24/7 helpline. They have experts who are standing by, and they can help you with crisis. They can, if you have a scenario like my mother will not bathe, or I don't know how to take away
That's a common one. That's another common one.
Yeah, they will actually, help walk you through that. When I was really at my wit's end, I called my mother's doctor and I talked it through with him, because I felt like, what I'm doing is not sustainable. Another thing people say is go to caregivers, meeting, but
like a support group.
A support group. What I found in doing research for my book is that there are a lot of people who are very uncomfortable doing that, or they feel like they don't have the time to do it, and they don't.
Are we talking about for the caregiver or for the dementia?
Caregiver?
Okay.
They don't want to share their personal information with
Sure.
a lot of strangers. So I think podcasts like your podcast, Dave, and there are other podcasts, there are some books, there's Alzheimer's Connect, there's some Facebook groups like the Caregiver Daughter. All those things are very helpful for people as well.
Yeah, and nobody wants to get to the point of burnout. I hate it when my phone, is flashing 20% and I say, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then it's flashing 10%. And it's, oh, and then it's flashing, 2%, danger, Will Robinson. And it's just, why didn't I take care of it earlier? We should not let our lives and our caregiver lives get to the point where we're 2% away from burnout, and from yelling and screaming and losing our temper. So, the best thing that we can do, and I think it's especially harder. I mean, all caregiving is hard, but it's especially difficult for Alzheimer's or dementia patients. And I used to say that about my wife, because my wife had a stroke and she has aphasia. She can't speak. And so our life is just charades and Pictionary, two games I hate, by the way, but that's the only way we can communicate. And I thought that was the worst thing that can happen. But no, not really. When my mother had dementia, I realized that there's something worse than that. It's not knowing who you are, not remembering who you are. See, at least my wife has everything in her mind. She knows what she wants to say. She just can't spit it out. So it's just a game of charades and Pictionary. But with my mother, there's no game. She just wonders, why is she still here? Why doesn't God take me away? And so there's things you can do that I've learned, like the headphones and the music. Things can bring her back momentarily. We have these moments. Why don't you talk about that, moments, and what we shouldn't do when we speak to a dementia or Alzheimer's patient, and what we should do? Because I always try to be logical, but no, that doesn't make any sense. No, Dad's been gone but we shouldn't do that, right?
Well, right. So, I remember after my father passed away, my mother kept asking me what happened. His name was Marvin. What happened to Marvin? And for a while, I would tell her, what had happened. And every time I told her, it was like she was grieving that death over and over again. And I felt like it was cruel to do that.
You were torturing them, yeah.
Yes. And so I eventually would tell her, he loves you so much and he's in a very safe place and he's fine. And she was satisfied with that. I'll tell you, for a while, my mom, kind of at the beginning, middle stage of the disease, she would all of a sudden remember a fact, just an obscure fact, about me or about one of my siblings. And I would think, she's there, she's in there. If I just ask her enough questions and I just get it out of her, she's going to come back. And I would spend a lot of time and energy
and frustration
asking her, and don't you remember? And let me show you this picture. And I think at the end of the day, she just agreed with me because she was really just kind of sick of me. But you just have to meet your loved one where your loved one is. And those moments are going to happen. And in a lot of ways, they're just heartbreaking, right? Because you so want your person to be back, and Alzheimer's is such a thief. It robs the person with Alzheimer's, and it robs the people who love the person with Alzheimer's, because you don't get to enjoy that person like you used to. But I think if you just accept that that's how the disease works, meet your relative or loved one where that person is, and have gratitude that you got to experience that moment, and then, move on from it. And try to make memories that you can enjoy later on in the disease. I found at the beginning of the disease, I spent a lot of time thinking about the end and where we inevitably would end up, that I think I missed out on a lot of good activities and more memories that we could have been making at the beginning of the disease. And I think those memories are so helpful at the end, because you can remember how, we went to my children's play at school and how much fun that was, or we used to go to museums, or my mom, there was a lot of life at the beginning, during mild cognitive impairment. And even a little after that, she continued writing, she arranged flowers, she wrote short stories. We were still able to really enjoy each other. I just had to be very cognizant that I met her where she was at that time.
Yeah, that's not easy to do, because you're concentrating on what she needs and her needs, and everyone wants to. Well, what about me? I want to sacrifice. I don't want to do this, and my sister used to say, well, why should I come and visit mom? Because she doesn't even know that I was there. And I said, well, you're not doing it for her. Maybe you're doing it for you. And maybe she does know that you're there, but doesn't show it, because maybe after you leave, she has a great day. She's just in a good mood, and she may not know why she's in a good mood, but you just put her in a good mood because you showed up, and here you're thinking that you had no effect on it. Why should I come back?
Yeah, and I think if you're the primary caregiver and you have, relatives or friends who say that, why should I go visit her? She doesn't even know if I'm there. It's also very easy to kind of focus on that and start to feel resentful about that, right? I mean, I think
You
that's
were talking about the caregiver?
The caregiver, a normal human reaction. Like,
they don't understand. They don't want to take the time to find out, who she is.
Yes.
No.
But you can only control your life.
Right.
You can't control other people's lives. So it's hard to do, but you have to, also meet other people where they are.
Yeah. In all fairness to my sister, she did take my advice, and she did come back again and again and realize that I was right. I hate it when I'm right.
Isn't it wonderful when you're right?
Yeah, other people don't always think so, but movies, Being Alice, The Notebook. Do you recommend them for caregivers of Alzheimer's or dementia patients? And how can they help?
I started to watch, Being Alice, and it was just too painful for me to watch. Before I went through the Alzheimer's journey, I loved the movie The Notebook, but now I really,
Can't watch it, huh?
I really just can't watch it.
Yeah. Heartbreaking scenes, because like I said, they come and they go, and nobody can watch that without crying. I know my mother was being tortured because she didn't want to be here, and like I said, asked God why, and I asked God, what possible purpose could she be fulfilling in hanging around? Because dementia patients and Alzheimer's, they seem to hang around for a long time, don't they?
Well, I can just speak from my mother's experience, but it was almost a decade long.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty typical too.
Yeah, it is. But I know a few minutes ago you had talked about, how do you not reach that stage of burnout? Are there things that you can do so that your phone doesn't get to the 2%?
Yeah. Thank you for coming back to that.
Yeah, no, of course.
We get on tangents.
And I would say don't live in the future, but try to plan for the future. Accept that you don't have control over Alzheimer's, but planning a bit might give you a sense of control and lower your stress level. And, what do I mean by that? So if you talk to the doctor and say, what's going to come next? What do we need to be, aware of as a family? What should we be thinking of? You might be able to go ahead and think through some scenarios which could help you later on, like, a stomach plug. We had a lot of discussions internally about, would your mother have a stomach plug when she stops eating, which is, a device by which
a feeding tube. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. And I had really thought that her legal documentation would have covered off a lot of these nuances. But what I found is, there are a lot of things in between, and it's very helpful if you kind of foresee those things and have a discussion about it, and you already know the answer to that when it comes up. Another thing might be living arrangements. Maybe mom's living at home right now, but eventually she may need to live somewhere else. So if you can go ahead and do that research, and if you're overwhelmed as the primary caregiver and you don't have time to do that, maybe that's something you can delegate, like to someone who's out of town. Could you do some research and make a list for me of possible places that we might want to look into for mom?
Yeah.
And I'd also say, I wish I had explored hospice care earlier, because I was under the impression that hospice is only for people who are at death's door. But
Right.
what I learned is that since Alzheimer's is a terminal condition, you may be able to qualify for hospice a lot earlier than you think. And
Palliative care, yeah.
palliative, but hospice is covered by Medicare.
Mm.
Normally, palliative care may not be.
Oh, really?
And hospice is just a type of medical care where the focus is on comfort
Right.
instead of cure. And they also have counseling and grief counseling and other things for caregivers.
Is there any time limit for hospice versus, well, they've got to die in 6 months or whatever, or how open-ended is it?
So I used to have this on the tip of my tongue, and it's actually in my book, but there is a time limit, but there is a way that you can extend it. And the hospice organizations will know how to do that with your doctor. And they'll also know kind of maybe there's some things that are covered by your insurance or by Medicare that might be helpful. So, for example, I didn't know there was such a thing as a high back wheelchair. I just never seen one before. But the minute hospice came in, they said, oh, your mom needs a high back wheelchair because she's kind of losing her muscular ability and she's kind of leaning over. And they were able just to arrange for that. And
How do they keep her in it? Do they strap her or is it concave?
No, it's just like, the way it's designed, I think
Leans
for
back
her,
a little.
yeah. Or they had good ideas, like at later stages of the disease, your loved one might grip really hard. And just simple ideas they had, like, rolling up a towel or something, or a little tube so that your loved one's gripping on that and not, hurting herself. Another way I think is, to prevent getting to burnout is to try to take a step back and see what you can do more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're still going to CVS or Walgreens to pick up your prescriptions every month, maybe you can have those delivered to you. I live in Houston, which is a big city, so this doesn't exist in a lot of locations, but like I found a mobile dentistry who would actually go to her, and they specialized in older people and people living with dementia, or a mobile nurse, or you may qualify under your insurance for like a bather to come to your house, or maybe physical therapy, which may also give you just a little bit of a break.
So what do we do about setbacks? Because it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. How do we not be discouraged or depressed, or maybe the caregiver needs to be on medication too? I don't know.
Well, I think Alzheimer, it's an emergent story. There are going to be lots of changes. I remember, one time I was going to pick my mother up to take her to go to the doctor, and I just assumed she would get in the car because she always got in the car. Right. We had never had that problem. I mean, I had to do her seatbelt, but she was always able to maneuver into the automobile. And this time it was just impossible. And really? I think you have to, verbalize that. Like, we're not going to be able to do this way anymore. Reframe it as a learning opportunity. How am I going to do this differently? What do I need to change? Is there a new strategy that I could use? And I think if you try to reframe it as something to learn from, that it helps you become a more resilient caregiver.
Right. Now, I've been doing caregiver wellness retreats, actually mastermind trainings, 6-month coaching, and then a bonus retreat vacation at the end of 7 days in Acapulco. And a lot of caregivers, even though they need that and they recognize they need it, they say, oh, I wish. But, they're full of excuses why they can't. My mother will only, respond to me. I can't be away for 7 days, or no, I can't get a stranger in here, a respite, etc. But yet, if they don't do that, they're going to burn out. And 30% of caregivers actually die before their loved ones do. Many more become sicker than the ones they're dealing with. Yeah. and become hospitalized and need a caregiver of their own. So it's like it's very short-sighted of them because, of course, they think they're doing great, but they're not eating right. They're not resting right. The average caregiver gets 2 hours rest every night when they need 8, and many of them, their patient, if you want to call their loved one their patient, should really be in a dementia ward or in a nursing home or at least in assisted living, because they're trying to watch them 24 hours a day like a staff of a facility, and they can't. But if they don't put their needs first and take a vacation or go to Acapulco with caregiver Dave or whatever, the body eventually will just say, I ain't doing it anymore, and just shut down. And now what are they going to do with their loved one who they insisted would not be with anybody else, but they're going to have to go with somebody else, and maybe a sibling who isn't quite as compassionate as you are might just throw them into a nursing home. I know a lot of siblings that would do that. They shouldn't be caregivers, but when sometimes the duties are just thrown upon somebody who doesn't have the gift for caregiving, they can do things like that. So how do you encourage a caregiver to take those breaks and to seek help when they need it, not when their body absolutely shuts down, not when your health is on 1%, and then when it goes down and the battery dies, an ambulance has to take you away?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And for me, it was the opposite. People would say, I hope you're taking care of yourself. What are you doing to take care of yourself? You really need to be taking care of yourself. And I would always say that I was fine. I am taking care of myself and I'm fine. Because I think people who are caregivers are dependable. They're responsible. For me, I'm a bit of a control freak, like I like things done my way. And I also wouldn't want to be the person who says, no, I'm not fine. Who wants to be that guy, right? But that makes it even harder for people who want to help to know what to do.
Right.
And so I think it's helpful. You kind of alluded to this, to do kind of a root cause analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So ask some open-ended questions. What's the reason that you don't want to go on the retreat? And like one thing you mentioned was, well, that person doesn't feel like it's an option because nobody's going to take care of my loved one like I take care of my loved one.
Yeah, and you're probably right. No one will be as good as you, but all you need is someone to take care of her adequately.
Adequately.
And they'll miss you. And when you come back, they'll appreciate you more. Absence makes the heart go fonder. It's almost like makeup sex,
So maybe in that instance, you could start slow. That caregiver is not going to say, okay, I'll leave the house for 3 hours while I do my errands and you watch dad or mom or sister. So maybe you could say, I'd like to come over and bring you lunch, and then while you're there, why don't you go upstairs and pay some bills or while I visit with dad for a while? Or, hey, are there things that I could do around your house while you're visiting with dad? Because I know you want to be the person who's really here with dad. And then you can kind of start slowly, I think. And then eventually maybe that person will see, Mary's not
see
as
how good it feels,
How
wow,
good
it
it
really
feels.
felt good to be away for an hour. Maybe I'll try 3 hours next time. And wow,
Yes.
I wonder if I can be gone for the whole day. And gee, I wonder if she'd miss me if I went for the weekend. And you slowly work your way up to it.
Slowly work your way up. I think a lot of caregivers too just have a lot of guilt. They feel like
Big
if
time.
I'm not there all the time, then I'm a bad caregiver, and never underestimate the power of just telling someone you should not feel guilty by putting your loved one in the hands of a loving environment or other people who are taking care of that person. You are doing a good job as a caregiver, and
Right.
and that person you're taking care of probably would want you to enjoy things.
Right. And they also worry about, well, what if something happens when I'm not there? What if they got sick and had to go to the hospital? What if they died and I wasn't there? I was in Hawaii having a good time or something. I could never live with myself, you know? What do you say to those people?
Oh, well, that's a tough one.
Nothing but
I
hard
mean,
questions here, you
that's
know?
a hard question. Since I'm a bit of a control freak, probably I would have made a list of like, here are
To-do
all the
list.
insurance thing. Here's where if mom gets
Yeah.
sick and she needs to go to a hospital, here's where she's going to go.
Right.
Here's the
It
number
would
of the doctor.
happen whether you were there or not there.
Yeah. And if you provided kind of the contact information, what is that person going to do that you wouldn't have done?
Right. Nothing.
You know?
And they can always call you up and
And they could
say,
always call you up. Yeah. And I'll tell you, during COVID, that was such a hard time
oh, yeah.
for caregivers and, the people you love, and especially from the caregiver's perspective, you couldn't see the person, you couldn't be with the person. Honestly, it was the one time I felt like I shouldn't feel guilty because it's literally legally not required for me to go over there, but I still felt bad. And my mother actually passed away during COVID, and we had that situation that you talked about with the phone,
Yeah.
of people saying goodbye, through the telephone.
Right.
And it obviously wasn't perfect because people would have wanted to be there, but at least you're getting to see your loved one, and your loved one is getting to see your face, and you do get maybe not the best sense of closure as if you could be there, but at least you have some sense of closure.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time. We still wanted to talk about, how do we talk to our children about Alzheimer's and the stigma that comes with having it. A lot of times the spouse will be in denial. Oh, no, 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 he's okay. He just forgets things every now and then. They minimize
Oh,
it. And
that was my family. Yeah, completely. Yeah.
and then you talk
That,
in
and
your book about the gift of documentation. So maybe you can touch on some of those.
Okay. Well, the gift of documentation is so important. That's just
Mm.
making sure you have, your legal documentation
Mm.
to be able to assist your loved one, because the law is very strict about your ability to obtain medical records, or, you can't even use your loved one's bank account to pay their own bills unless you're
Right.
legally authorized. And the way to do that is through documentation. But in order to
Or to
put that
be
in
on
place,
the bank account as a signer.
or to be on the bank account,
Yeah.
yeah, to take care of these things.
And now's the
And
time to do all this, right? And the living will, which is, no. My mother, we had that all filled out, and she had to go to the hospital one time because she had some trouble swallowing. And I told the doctor right up front, but I said, listen, my mother knows Jesus and she wants to go, and don't look for excuses to keep her alive because she has these documents. And he says, oh, okay. I was going to put a feeding tube. She said, no, she doesn't want that, And he says, well, then we'll just have to, basically starve her and give her, the medication, morphine, so that she's not in any discomfort. Then she got this bladder infection. And I says, well, what can you do with that? I said, we can give her an antibiotic. And so she was gone in 3 days. And that was a nice thing. She was able to say goodbyes. We got all the family there. And she had her will. She had the death that she wanted, and that we wanted too, because it was terrible to see her suffer like that.
yeah, well, I'm glad that you had that. Uh, and a lot of people actually resist putting that type of documentation in place. And so I do include in my book kind of tips or suggestions for how to talk to a loved one who doesn't want you to have that type of authority.
Yeah. Well, it's much easier to do it than to feel awkward explaining it, and you just need to fill them out together. And I know with my aunt, we did it together, and I says, do you want a feeding tube? And she couldn't understand a lot of these things. And I says, well, there were movies out where they kept someone alive, and the spouse had one opinion and the parents had another opinion. They went to court. And but I think I got her to understand that if you're like brain dead and you don't know what you are, and you don't know who you are, and you don't know who I am, do you really want to stay alive? And she's, no, I don't want that. So
Well,
put it in as easy words as you can, if you're a little late in the process, to at least get that thing filled out and get her to sign it.
yeah, as long as they still have the legal capacity to do it. But one thing I think is helpful is just to remind them the reason why you want this is to respect their wishes.
Right.
It's you want to make sure as a caregiver you're doing what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I wish we had some more time, but
Thank you.
I just want to tell everybody to remember that this show and all our shows are recorded podcasts after they are live, and you can listen to them on your favorite platform that I mentioned earlier, or on caregiverdave.com, on my free membership website. And another reminder, my newly released book, Secrets from the Hammock, is Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times, is spreading wisdom all over the world. It's available wherever books are sold, on my free membership website, caregiverdave.com. And join my Caregiver Dave Facebook community of 34,000 caregivers, where you learn all about my new caregiver wellness retreat and mastermind vacation in Acapulco that I offer to burnout caregivers, trying to keep as many of those 30% of caregivers who die before their loved ones alive. And if you click the like or follow button on whatever platform you're watching or listening, that helps us even reach more caregivers by improving Google's search engine algorithms. Did we mention your book? I can't remember.
I think we did at the beginning. It's called The Gap Between Loving and Supporting Someone with Alzheimer's. And, you can find it wherever you buy a book. You can also go to my website, www.marymoreland.com, to learn more about it if you're interested.
Great. Wherever books are sold. So until next week, same time, same channel. Thank you, Mary. And thank you, everyone who tunes in, and for making us the #1 caregiver podcast on the internet. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. It's Dave Nassani, otherwise known as Caregiver Dave. And I'm coming to you live from this beautiful Acapulco villa, which I like to say is the perfect prescription for caregiver burnout. And I have a unique opportunity to bring 14 burned out caregivers up here so that they can decompress and do all the things that they need to do. But this is just a bonus. It actually comes with the 6-month Zoom coaching program. It's a one-on-one consult with me, Caregiver Dave, to identify where you are and where you need to go. It's a 6 monthly small group coaching sessions to smash any obstacles between you and your ideal vision of what a caregiver needs to be and caregiver success. You get my 3 free books and instructions on boundaries, grief, self-care, organization, asking for help, learning how to say no, avoiding burnout, avoiding depression, avoiding perfectionism, avoiding isolation, avoiding resentment, delegation, team building, how to have fun, how to have no guilt, the importance of gratitude, and after caregiving, when you're no longer a caregiver. But this 7-day bonus is absolutely free. It comes with the coaching program that you pay for. And the food is all inclusive. I'm telling you, 7 days and 7 nights here is amazing. This is truly paradise. And I highly recommend it. For more information, go to caregiverdave.com. That's going to send you to my other website. And if you want a shortcut to get there immediately, just go to acapulcodave.com. Thanks again. I look forward to seeing you in Acapulco.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing.